In 2013, the Bundaberg Regional Galleries were successful in receiving funding from the Australian Government through the Australia Council, its art funding and advisory body. This funding allowed the galleries to launch the Literary Notions program, an exhibition series showcasing the artwork of 6 contemporary installation artists who have been inspired by the written word, namely in the form of literature. The 6 artists are all leading Australian and international contemporary artists who are working in diverse mediums, including interactive digital technology, recycled plastic, sculpture, street art, animation, and found object installation. The aim of the Literary Notions program is to heighten the understanding of what installation art is and explore how literature has inspired and informed the works as part of the installation series. To further support the program, the formation of a book club has allowed the community to be able to read the related novel, view the installation work, meet the artist, and discuss the ideas explored in the novel and the work. This week, the Bundaberg Regional Art Gallery opened After Rain 2, an installation by renowned contemporary artist Hossein Valamanesh, who is one of the 6 artists in the Literary Notions program. Hossein is one of Australia's most significant contemporary artists. Growing up in the remote town of Kash, a mountainous region in the east of Iran near the Pakistani border, Hossein's family then moved to Tehran in 1960. After graduating from the School of Fine Art and Painting in Tehran, and at the age of 24, Hossein then emigrated from Iran to Perth, Australia in 1973. In 1974, Hossein travelled with a group of artists and musicians through the Western Desert, visiting Aboriginal communities, including Papunya and Warburton. In 1975, Hossein moved to Adelaide to study at the South Australian School of Art, where he met his future wife and collaborator Angela Burden. Hossein graduated from the South Australian School of Art in 1977. Hossein's work is influenced by his position as an Iranian-born Australian and explores the common ground between cultures, as well as aspects of displacement and travel. Hossein often works with elemental substances, natural materials, and found objects, arranging them into pieces that explore themes such as place and identity. While best known for his sculpture and installation work, Hossein's practice has also included works on paper, photography, and theatre staging. Hossein has exhibited frequently in Australia and overseas, including Germany, Poland, Finland, and Japan, completing a number of major public art commissions in Adelaide, Tokyo, and Sydney. And his work is also held in most major public Australian art collections. Tonight, Hossein will provide an overview of his art practice over the past 35 years. It is my pleasure to introduce you to him. Please make him welcome.
I think it's quite warm in here. Thank you very much, Rana, and thanks for. It feels rather strange sitting there and hearing your life pass by, but it makes it easier. Then I don't have to explain all those points, which is great. Yes, as you described, it's been a wonderful journey for me to be here and be able to say that I'm a practicing artist. As you described, my early beginnings in Iran in the 60s, I studied, and then coming to Australia. And since I could say, from when you start sort of showing work in galleries and so on, would be early 80s, late 70s, where I could say I started my practice. What I have put together here is a collection of images which will sort of, presuming that most of you would not know of my work, I'm giving quite a, hopefully, a run through the kind of different aspect and different themes going throughout my work from about, I just have to turn the first slide on to see what, yeah, this is around late 80s. And when I was working in Iran, I was in the 60s and early 70s, I was more concerned with social and political issues of the time when the Iran was had a government of the dictatorship of the Shah, and we were all kind of really thinking about those issues. But when I moved to Australia, I started looking at more nature and my own personal thinking, and that idea that gave me a space to be more question my own thoughts rather than trying to somehow change the world. And through that, through the art school, I was really fortunate to be able to experiment with many materials, and I always wanted to be a painter, but through experimenting with material and different ideas, I realized I was more interested in texture, more interested in the reality of the objects, or the material itself, and then slowly started making installations and I never felt so comfortable with the term sculptor. I don't think in that traditional form of being a sculptor, although I have made lots of three-dimensional work. I think that idea is somehow determined to be standing up or being hang on the wall, rather than, because there is quite a strong notion of sculpture in Western art, and I don't feel myself being part of that tradition. But I could say I'm more of a visual artist who works with many different mediums, as you will see throughout these slides. In mid-80s, I started looking at my own shadows and my own outline of my body and trying to fill it with different images and different elements. I didn't want that person that is. We were talking about this other day about how the work is very personal, because it is actually me who is standing there, but at the same time it could be you, it could be anybody. In that sense, that's what I felt made the work somehow converse with the viewer. This is called Growing Up, which is the image of me with my shadow, which is disappeared, and I could always imagine that a bowl of water in the end, it's sort of what allows the mind to grow, and the earth in the body could be nourished by that water. And this work is called the Open Book, which is an empty book, again, of my own outline of my body. And I imagined that this was me with nothing written in it, and that emptiness which allows you to think of new ideas, and somehow that ribbon which separates the pages is for me was like the blood running through my body. Of course, as you mentioned about how my work has been influenced by a number of things, when one of them is my birthplace, my culture, and we were talking about this yesterday, how all the Iranian people I've met and the way I grew up, poetry is part of our kind of, blood, one could say, but I don't wish to make that claim for everybody. But that didn't matter in Iran what you did. You were an artist or you were anybody. Your mother always read you poems, or before going to exam, she opened the Hafiz and said, "Oh yes, you're going to pass this exam," or sort of give you some clue about what. In that sense, we always read poetry, or be it orally or being read to us, or we were reading it in the books. In that sense, I'm not an avid reader, but I have read poetry quite a lot. And this work is based on a poem by Maulana, which is Afghani-born poet who traveled to Baghdad and then ended up in Turkey. But he fortunately wrote all his poems in Persian language, which we are fortunate to be able to read. And this poem talks about the shirt and you and the way you, and the idea of love. If I was to, now I have a bit of a caution here because I know there's an Iranian gentleman here who probably will pick on my translation, but this is about, the poem talks about how from the idea of love you tear your shirt apart and you become one with your beloved, and then there is, in a sense, there's no shirt, or you become the shirt, and then your inner self becomes your beloved. But it's a very, and the material in that work is made of lotus leaves, which was an accidental material, came to my work in mid-90s, and I have used it a number of times since. I should go a bit faster on these images because there's quite a lot of work, and I better push on. Yeah. In 93, I just mentioned Maulana Rumi, and then this is another influence from his poetry. In 93, I was invited to go to Poland for this particular installation, and I had been there in 91 and saw this space, and I somehow imagined this one dancer, this dervish dancing in this space, and I went back in 93 to Turkey and visited these people, and then made this work. This is a dance without a dancer. The dance becomes the person itself, and it's titled "The Lover Circles His Own Heart," and it's always accompanied with a poem. That the poem proclaims that everything is always moving, everything revolving around that idea of movement, and the lover, of course, going around his own heart, and the atoms go around the nucleus and the planets, and that movement, what is keeping us together, and what we become as one in that notion of movement. It's a very beautiful poem. In 94, I made this work in Japan called "You Just Sit Here, I Will Keep My Eyes Open." As it were, I was always standing in my shoes, looking at the road, making sure that cars don't come and run the person who's sitting on that chair. And it's still there, I think. Yeah. And I was talking about this yesterday. I took the shadow from Australia because the days I was installing was raining. It means that actually a shadow shifted all the way from Adelaide to Tokyo. The simplicity of the work and what is evident that there is not, you will not see anything new in my work, except the way I have made it. The shirt is not new, the chair is not new. There is no new imagery except what you are familiar. And that's the way that I use these images to get people to enter my work. This work called "The Lovers." This was made in early 2000 after return from Switzerland. It's a map of Switzerland, and again I'm wearing the landscape as my shirt. They all become kind of like a self-portrait in a sense. This is a work called "Longing, Belonging." It was in 1997 when I felt I've been here half of my life. I was about 50 years old, and I've been 23, 24 years in Iran and then here. And I wanted to celebrate this time. I wanted to say, yes, I belong here. I'm part of this. And what you do when you go to a new place, you start a campfire, you start a new life. And I started that. Of course, I brought my baggage with me. I brought my Persian carpet. These are all metaphorically speaking, as much as it is real here. And I put my carpet down, I started my fire, and then celebrated this event of being here. But of course, there's always consequences of travel and what you gain and what you lose. And here I lost the heart of that, what I brought with me. But within that heart, there was a void created, which is nothingness. And that nothingness is full of opportunities and full of new possibilities. And in a sense, that black hole is not a negative thing from my point of view. But I have spoken with people who found that quite hard to take. And it was a very important work for me to do, because it was, I did, and I lived with that particular carpet for 20 years, and it was very hard to burn it. But now I have added value, and it's in a collection of an art gallery of New South Wales, if you want to be more rational about it. A similar work in a sense to what we have here in a very different way. It's an upside down lavender bush. And again, referring to Rumi, I was looking at the work of Bill Viola, who's an American wonderful artist of video art, been at it for a long time, and very, very inspirational artist. And one of his installations, he made a quotation from Rumi and said, for trees to reach the light, they have to hide their roots in darkness. In that sense, that idea of not avoiding negatives or dark areas of your thoughts, but you have to have somehow grounded in darkness to be able to reach for the light. And I reversed that notion, burnt the branches and put the light in the roots of the plant. And it's an untitled work. I think these works sort of refer to that cultural conversation of the two objects of a carpet from Balochistan, where, as was mentioned, I grew up as a kid. Although I wasn't born there, but I spent quite my childhood there. And a Baluchi carpet and a table. These are carpets for us just furniture, like it's part of daily life. And here I am illuminating this carpet through the holes I drilled into the table, which is my body, which allows you for you to see the carpet. In that sense, those beams of light which are projected into the carpet is the way I am showing it to you. And also it's a homage to one of my early interactions in Australia with the Indigenous artists of Australia in 1974 in Papania, where I started my first painting in Australia of a dot painting, which I did about 3 or 4 of them. And of course I moved on to do my own paintings or my own way of painting, but they were very generous, the Papania painters, to allow me to paint a couple of pictures there with them, and that was sort of a bit of a homage to them. And I've done some number of so-called dot paintings after this as well. There was a dot painting for beginners and others, which may be on the slide list, I'm not sure. And among all these other practices within the studio and exhibition, I've done a number of public art projects, which, as I mentioned, since '99, since this work, I collaborated with my partner, Angela, who's an artist also. We went to art school in the mid-'70s. And this is a memorial to the famine of 1848, I think it was, in Ireland, of potato famine, known as potato famine. And we had a wonderful client, the historical houses and the Irish community in Sydney, and they allowed us to knock this wall down, a section of it, and rebuild it in this way. And by doing that, we were able to show both sides of a story, the idea of migration and starvation of these poor people, mainly women, young women who came to Sydney, and also their settlement in Australia. And this is the side which shows the famine. Basically, there's a bowl on the table, but it's so empty you can see the floor, you can see the ground, even the table cannot hold its emptiness. In 2000, this is an installation I did in Japan as a temporary work, titled Memory of Snow. I'm just showing you a different variety of elements, and this was sort of like a dream. I was walking around the village where I installed this work. It was a beautiful forest, and I kept seeing these ladders poking out of the houses to about 2 meters up above the roof. And I thought, oh, that's strange. Why do they want to go that high? What is in there? And they said, oh, that is how much snow falls. And they have to go all the way up there to start shoveling the snow off the roof. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. The ladders are remembering where the snow is. And hence I started making these ladders looking like snow. They were very soft and covered with very soft fabric. And then that was the house, which was like a dream floating above the forest, or within the forest, I should say. And the ladders kind of started very early, in mid-70s in my work. I looked at ladders like an architectural device for climbing to the roof. In villages in Iran, everywhere you travel, there's always a ladder lying around somewhere. And again, but like a chair or like any other, it has a very simple function, and the proportion of it is beautiful. But also it can suggest ideas of what is a ladder. You go from one point to another, and it's a notion of change and elevation. And this one, again, inspiration from the Rumi poem. He says that madmen have seen the moon. They are running to the roof with ladders, and they are going up there. They think they're going to reach the moon. And this is me as a madman trying to reach the moon, as it were. But the materiality of the objects and the way the ladder becomes ephemeral in itself, in a sense of becoming lighter in color. And this is another untitled ladder, which is reflected into a mirror in the ceiling of the gallery. It's about 6 meters high. Again, what is real and what is imagined, this ladder could go beyond your imagination. Another public work made in 2005. This work had some briefing part of the commission that we had to use no idea of water, because there was a fountain there and people were very fond of water, and we were asked to include water. Again, a collaboration with Angela, my partner, and we were inspired by a very beautiful opalized vertebrae of Ichthyosaurus, which was found in Kupipidi. And we took that form of the vertebrae and converted it into these black granite objects, which the water comes through the center of each piece and then overflows each. Means always the sculpture is always wet. Means it's always renewing itself, moving through. And the nice thing about it is that the kids love it, the birds love it, and people can actually walk through it if they don't mind getting a little bit wet. And it's very quiet. It's you can see the environment around it. We're very pleased with the way it functions. And we have a Christmas pageant there, and I've seen kids sitting in it, which is like a little bath and keeping cool. It's been fantastic. Another ladder. It's called Snakes and Ladders. This is and these ladders are made of very twisted pieces of wood. They're very not much thicker than my thumb, and then I cut them, and then there are gold inside each ladder. It's sort of called Snakes and Ladder, that game that we always get the number, we go up and then we come down, and I see that this notion of desire of reaching for higher things, like the material things like the gold, it always holds the snake in it. It means the snake and the ladder become one. I think since I've moved to Australia, and a little bit before, I had a great interest in natural materials. And the way I loved and the one way of keeping, because we are so living in cities and towns, and we're so isolated from nature. And one of the pleasures for me had been to be able to use natural materials, at least to start off the work, then keep contact with, somehow force myself, although as much as it's a pleasure, to be in touch with nature. And that somehow, first of all, humbles you, because the complexity of nature, it's so much that it sort of puts you in your place, as it were. This was a fallen branch of a white peppercorn tree, white cedar, my apologies, which was fallen in our streets after strong winds, and I dragged it to my studio, hence the title Fallen Branch, and started putting it together, and eventually I realized it wasn't feasible to present it as something like that, and I got it cast in bronze. This was a work I did in a residency in Japan in 2006. I spent about 2 months there, and I made basically this work. And it was writing one word, love, over and over again, over about 20 pieces of paper. And I ground up saffron, which has a beautiful yellow color. And I think love and madness are very close together. And you have to be a bit crazy to fall in love. And the yellow is supposed to be a color of madness. That's what they say. But I love it. The work is, and people were fascinated by it. They thought it was a sun rising, or, I mean, of course, Japanese couldn't read the writing, but it was fine. And now it's in the collection of National Gallery in Canberra. This is another work. After that, I started doing a number of work. This one was around the time when I was working on the play. We were talking last night about notion of extinction and danger of love becoming extinct, in a sense, the way we are living these days. And here I was sort of pushing that idea of in the middle, as much as it appears to be, it actually, the word love becomes nearly disappears. I put so much water in the saffron that you can hardly see the word. And then, but I have hope of it becoming alive again, and it becomes, and this notion of scroll is that this possibility of love disappearing from our lives, it happens through history. It's not one-off occasion, and it happens all the time. This is another version of that called Big Love. And again, after that, I started playing with the ideas of words, and this is, in Farsi, it spells 2 words, which are quite close together. One is called June, which means life, although it's a very colloquial saying. It's not John, is more formal. June, and then we have another word called Khun, which is blood, and which is also very related to each other. And with looking at this, you don't know what I'm saying. Am I saying blood or am I saying life? And then, hence, I call the work Lifeblood. And it's to do with rhythm, it's to do with calligraphy, and how much through our art and through culture, calligraphy had become an important aspect of our culture because of the certain limitation that religion put on the practice of art. Then calligraphy became, because artists are kind of genius. They kind of find other ways of expressing themselves which introduce new language or new way of expression. You can't sort of shut them up, as it were. This is a very recent work. I think I made this about last year. And again, reading the poetry of Rumi, I came to these 2 words which are quite similar. And one's called hasti, which means to be, and the other one called masti, which means to be drunk. And again, like the word of love and madness, masti also used quite metaphorically of a place of intoxication, or when we are the ones who have had experience of getting slightly pissed, you kind of feel free. You kind of feel like, oh, yeah, you can, do this and but this is again metaphorically used by poets to say that freedom that you allow yourself when you're drunk should be actually part of your life. You should be masked all the time. You should be kind of a little bit more braver than one is. And that sense, when we hear masti in bit like being crazy, as it were, sort of, it's a heightened place of being. And then here again, there's the blue is the Masti, which is a bit more elusive, like a dream. Is like the drunkenness, and then the Hasti is the black, and the dots shared between all of them of the same color. Now going back to, we were talking last night about literary notions of how text and writing influences art, and I just put these works to kind of say how it is influenced, without sometimes it's just one word. But this was the material of this cactus which I used to do this work. This is a work approximately 4 meters across. Each one of these papers are about a meter square. And I started writing that word no, and the cactus is called crown of thorn, which is really hard to handle and start getting hurt by it. I had to wear strong gloves. And then I started thinking about other words associated with being hurt, like love, touching, and possibilities, and made this little one-line poem, I suppose, Don't Touch Love, which was as a warning for not being hurt, as it were. And the blood is like that line running between the pages. And this is, again, another text work. Again, material triggered the idea of using that particular poem. This is the second half of a selection of a poem by Maulana, which, again, he proclaims that everything in the world is somehow drunk. They are somehow being touched by that wine of love, as it were. But of course, I don't expect you to be able to read it. But in the poem, generally, the ruler is drunk, the servant is drunk, the friend, the stranger, the garden, the flowers, the earth, the water, the wind, the whole, everything. But I made I made it with the grapevine sticks. They are all made of grapevine. And I'm sort of because the kind of drunkenness I know, it's only the wine. I don't know of that. Only I could wish. It's a wishful thinking in a sense. That's what I'm going back to the wine, to the grapevine, because my drunkenness is never be like what he is trying to teach me. And this is a self-portrait. We were talking about this idea of being upside down, and some of these works quite accidental. Like I was offered this bird nest by my wife's brother from their farm, and it's made by jade, this crow-like bird, and it was like somebody making artwork. It was a beautiful object, and I didn't know what to do with it. And one day, because I wear hats a lot, and one day I just put it on my head, and it somehow, then I saw my own reflection. I thought, this is what I have to do with it. But of course, not as a hat, but as a nest, as it were, and the work ended up called Nesting. And it's like me kind of hovering like a bat inside this crazy situation. Quite a large installation I made in 2008, Adelaide Biennale. It was called Leave Your Shoes Here. Over the times I grew up in Iran and going to mosques, and then later on traveling around the world, going to different places of worship, and always somehow being affected by these architectural spaces, and knowing that I don't believe in God. Why am I so touched by these places? And I was questioning this, trying to work out the reasoning in my head. And I realized that it is the architecture. It is the power of art of the architect who is seducing me to feel calm or feel somehow zoom into a certain place, or somehow, it kind of takes me somewhere else. And I wanted to make that space in without referencing to any religion, and I decided to create these. And at the same time, I knew that I felt that the base of all this architecture is actually quite hollow. Since I don't believe in it, then all these columns are actually not so solid. And I decided to make a space which was the columns were suspended in the air and they didn't actually touch the ground. But somehow within them, they carried the light and they carried the darkness. In that sense, when you walk around this space, you're confronted by two elements of the darkness and light. And then there were, of course, lots of carpets because it referred to the notion of being in a special place. And I asked the viewers to take their shoes off. And there were a number of prayer rugs there, but they were all pointing in different directions. And now we come to the purpose of my being here to some extent of this installation I have in the gallery. And that is in some ways very much connected to a play which I designed a set for in 2008. And that was called When the Rain Stops Falling. And these are some of the imagery from that play. It's a very complex play. I was talking about how it was number of layers, number of stories going on all the time. And in this particular scene, these two people are in Adelaide. This person is in London and she's in Ayers Rock. But they're all happening at the same time. And she's just about to eat the ashes of her sons because she's gone crazy. And she just finds out that her husband been... Anyway, that's another... I won't go into that. Yeah. Anyway, it's just the imagery. I created these layers of that they're possible. But every now and... depending to what part of the play, these screens would disappear or then other elements come true. This is another scene of the play. They all come and sit together every now and again and have soup, a fish soup. And this was the particular scene which inspired me again to make the work for the exhibition here. But in the play, the tree did not revolve, and it just came to the stage, stayed there for a while, and pretended to be in a park, and then disappeared. But I just would put some of these images to show you how complex and how interesting for me, in a way, making art. And I had, as I was saying last night, I had a great interest in theatre before coming here. For a very short period of time, I was an actor in Iran. And that sort of always kept in my mind sort of the idea of presenting something in a more dramatic sense, even the lighting of my work and other elements of, and I see when a person approaches a piece of sculpture, it becomes like a performance, like you actually have a human scale to relate to, and that is very important to me. Yeah, this is another scene. Yeah, actually, they are not at the same place. He's actually being touched by some imagined person, and she's actually, it's a very, very beautiful play. And that's my hat. And this is another one. And this is the stars over southern hemisphere, and kind of just before we goes to the star, and that table and the lady there actually in London. And it's sort of, the play happens in many different places, and it's quite beautiful. I think this might be coming towards the end. This is a most recent public work we did in Adelaide. It's a gate for Botanic Gardens, or one of the gates of Botanic Gardens. It's called the Ginkgo Gate. And the way it functions, that this wall revolves. It's a bit like the turning the tree is doing, but it only do it once a day. It goes that way, like this. And this is the gate, closed and open. And the ginkgo I had used in the leaf in some of my work, and then we decided behind this gate there's a new garden established of Garden of Health, the relation between medicine and plants. And that sense we thought ginkgo, being one of the oldest plants and supposedly has lots of medicinal qualities, was a very appropriate image to use. This is a video piece which called Passing Time. Again, it was an act I was playing as a kid, and then suddenly I remembered I was doing this as a child, and I asked my son, who is a filmmaker, to make this video work, which is now it's a work in itself, a collaborative work with him. And this is the work we're showing here as it was seen in Adelaide. I've been going back to Iran more recently, and I hadn't been to Iran for 25 years. Since 2002, I've been quite a number of times, and I may be going there actually in a couple of months again. And of course, as you all aware, and because we get only the political news here, this is a kind of like a cult made of patchwork. And I remember an occasion that there were these mothers were going protesting in front of a prison, a very big prison in Tehran, and for their kids who were arrested in Evin prison. And I thought, what would these mothers feel like doing is to free their children. And that sense, and what mothers do, they make comfort. And this cult making, which is a kind of craft practice which is done by so many different people around the world. And what would they write on this? Because cults were used as a way of sending messages, for example, from the slaves in America, and black people, and this has quite a rich history. Anyway, this particular cult spells the word azadi, means freedom, and I presume that they wish that the freedom for their children. But it's sort of slightly out of focus in a way because it's all repeated over and over again. This is very recent work, and I was in Iran a few years ago, and I went to a mosque in Isfahan, and when I looked at the ceiling, I was seeing like indigenous Australian art with these beautiful lines, and I said I have to make this, and I haven't changed much of the actual design. What I've done, I've just used lotus leaves as bricks and just laid the bricks into this. It's a very, very beautiful architectural space, and it's called the Lotus World. And this is a very recent work, again talking about place and again referring to poetry. This is a map made of many maps. I've cut up all the oceans into squares, and I cut up all the land into squares, and then have written this very beautiful poem, which it's questioning, where have I come from? What was the purpose of my coming? Where am I going? Won't you show me my home? And again, a beautiful poem which goes on, and it's a whole different, I was really pleased the way it worked out. I think this is the end of my presentation, and I would like to extend this talk to a conversation, and would like to invite you to ask, if you wish, that is, any questions or any comments. I'll be happy to converse, as it were. Please.
Has any of the art of Persepolis influenced you or deliberately avoided that ancient Persian art?
And the question was that have I been influenced by that? By the Persepolis is a remnants of a very major palace in the pre-Islamic kind of Iran, near Shiraz, and I have been there many times, and because I lived in Shiraz for a short time. No, I wasn't influenced, but when you asked me the question, it triggered a memory of my first visit to Iran, because of my state of mind at that particular late 60s, being a kind of a young redhead in a way. I actually was revolted by that place. I thought, now I can see it, and I really appreciate the beauty of its carvings and grandeur of art. But I thought to myself, wow, this is with so much slavery. And who made this place? You know, I was really saddened. I've got over it, of course, but that was my first reaction to that building. I found going to these really huge, like going to a cathedral or something. Who made this thing? Who actually sweat and tears, as it were, who contributed to the construction of such a thing? But of course, I was a young communist then, and I kind of criticized everything. But I still think about them, and I'm still concerned about. Like today, I was going on a boat trip on your beautiful river to the mouth of the river, and there was an interesting commentary going on about the slavery here, and how the people were kidnapped from Kanak Islands and brought here, and the kind of treatment of that stuff, and it is important. And then you look at the glory of the sugarcane industry, and of course it's there, but you know, it's all part of our history, and that's how I relate to it. But no, I am interested in the history of art. I've just been looking at beautiful Persian miniatures in Smithsonian Institution in Washington, and I am hoping to make a series of work based on that idea. But again, what I'm seeing in that is the battles. When you look at our beautiful Persian miniatures, which look really lovely from a distance, they are full of violence, and record our history and our stories of battles and so on, which is still going. Our region is full of it. And yeah, I don't know where am I going with that answer, but that's, I think, is short enough. Respond to you, I hope. Yeah. Please.
I'm wondering if you use music with any of your works, or
Have I? The question is that have I used any music with my work? No, not yet. Not yet. I'm in the process of thinking about two sort of major video pieces. One of them is sort of being nearly made, hopefully in Victoria, and the second one's going to be made in Iran. And maybe there will be sound with them, but I'm not sure what they will yet. Yeah, no, it's another whole different ball game. I'm sort of moving into moving image is already hard enough, and now thinking of sound would be fun. Yeah.
Hossein, do you have a concept of why lighting seems quite influential or important in your work? So I'm thinking about your early shadow works, you know, light illuminated through holes, working with you in the vault.
Yeah.
The theatre side of light?
Yeah, I think it's in its visual sense, it is the theatre which comes to mind. But also if you think of it conceptually also, without light, we turn everything off here in this room, we may not exist in a sense. We only see each other because we see there's light, and then that creates the shadow, and there's light, darkness, and then we sort of stay in the middle of that. And then metaphorically speaking, like imagine if the sun doesn't rise tomorrow, and there will be no shadows. But it's all kind of, I don't know, but it's very fascinating when you think about how the light and shadow, I'm just trying to, as I'm talking to you, I'm trying to remember a poem again, because it's such an important kind of, by Attar. I can't recall it exactly, but he says, when the light rose exactly above, I disappeared, because there was no shadows anymore. And he talks about himself like being a shadow of a cloud. And that sort of, somehow the insubstantial nature of shadows, I think we are like shadows in some ways, and only exist here because there is some light shining somewhere else. I don't know if that, yeah. But theatre is beautiful. You can, and the other thing is also the trickery, because we are doing lots of. The art is a beautiful way of saying very beautiful lies. We make up all these beautiful, not lies in a bad way, but it's not real. It's just like all imagined world. And lighting and shadows are all part of that sort of dream world, and it's very beautiful. Yeah.
Can I ask, with the shadows, you have your own conception of shadow.
Yeah.
But seeing your installations, how do you avoid the shadows at the art gallery?
Oh, tricky. I mean, I try, and luckily I have been working with sort of people who know how to light exhibitions, and I have some idea. I mean, we had a bit of fun in the gallery here, and you don't put the shadow behind the viewer. You don't put the light source behind the viewer. Yeah, but it is interesting because in the first image, I'm not sure if I push this, go back there or not, but no, probably not. Anyway, the figure with the ladder, yeah, that one was just, again, we threw lights into the ground where the false shadow was, because the shadow wasn't the shadow of the object. It was a piece of metal I had cut up and put on the ground, because if it was the real shadow, you will see my head in the work. No, just all sort of trickery and smokes and mirrors. Please.
I was interested when you spoke last night about the collaboration with the other artists for the play,
Yep.
and you said there was experimentation that went on over several months, and you weren't concerned about an end point. It was just for the sake of experimenting.
Yeah.
And when we see your work here, it's incredibly simple and meaningful. I wonder how much experimentation you go through, or is it happening in your head and you reach a final work, or what happens?
I think it's come to a point that I kind of do quite a bit of that experimentation in my head. I kind of know things work, but still I do a lot is to do with scale, with materiality, and not everything I make works. And lots of it gets chucked in the bin. And yeah, it's just, no, it is, because every time I have a new idea, I have to learn how to make it. Because before, if I was a, say, painter, I got actually skilled in using paint, then I'd be good at that. I don't need to kind of know which layer goes first or something. But here I am sort of, I hadn't gluing something together, and then there's this map, and how do you, and of course these days everybody to some extent concerned about longevity and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, no, there's quite a bit, but not as much maybe. Yeah, and of course when you're working with other people, then you, in that particular occasion, it was important because we didn't know each other that well. I mean, we were all quite, I mean, maybe the director and the writer knew each other much closer than I knew either of them. In that sense, it was great to see how they were thinking. Because I think all artists struggle in a similar way. It's not that easy to make good art, and you fail a lot, and every now and again things work out.
I was wondering how politics of Iran at the time of your departure, as well as throughout the remainder of your life up until now, has influenced your artwork at all?
This is the question about how politics of Iran through time, from 70s up to now, influenced my work. As you saw, there was a work I was making, was, okay, one could say it was political, but it was more emotional response to a situation. It was my wishful thinking. I think I'm much more softer and much less knowing in my response to it than I was when I was 18 and 20. I thought I knew how the world was run, and I wanted to change it to my angle of it. But of course, I realized later that I was very naive. And my paintings of that period are very direct and very illustrative. This is like 60s and the time I was in the army. No, I think art can change, influence the world, but I don't see my language and my way of expression being of a direct political expression. And of course I am saddened by situations of the political injustice in all the world. But of course I am particularly interested and concerned about Iran and Afghanistan and Iraq. They are our brothers and neighbors, but I find myself hopeless in a sense. But just I think what I'm going back to Iran now is more through culture and through art. There are so many beautiful young aspiring to be artists and writers and filmmakers, and they are there. They are actually making art in that place, and it is wonderful. No, it's very actually when I go there and see these people, it just really makes me feel very happy and hopeful for the future. But our country is going through some period of, I don't know what the answer is or how it's going to change, but it will change. When I was in Iran, I never thought the Shah will go, and he went like a lead balloon. And these people go to. The time history has shown us that things change, but it's our turn to suffer for a while, I think. Now, it's been really lovely. Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for the gallery and everybody. It's been a wonderful experience from the day I was asked to be participating in this. Everything been done so professionally and so properly, and I'm really pleased to be here and have enjoyed my few days being here and done all the tourist thing, drank a bit of rum, and it's been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hossein, for a very informative discussion. I think it's always lovely to hear from the artists themselves, and especially your sources of inspiration, the stories behind your works, and also the variety of materials that you've used. So thank you very much. We have had the pleasure of working alongside Hossein this week, as he has been staying at the gallery residence. Hossein, we would like to sincerely thank you for being able to come to Bundaberg and for being so generous in sharing your time and information with staff and volunteers, and we wish you all the best in the future. We would like to sincerely thank our sponsors of the Literary Notions program, Dymocks Booksellers, Newsmail, Bundaberg Radiology, and again to the Australia Council for the Arts for being able to bring Hossein to Bundaberg and his work. We would also like to thank the Bundaberg Health Services Foundation, who have supported tonight's event by staying open especially to provide us with their wonderful coffee. So thank you to Tanya for being here tonight. And please, after the speeches are over, perhaps you might consider supporting the Bundaberg Hospital by purchasing a coffee before you leave tonight. Thank you also to the Bundaberg Library for their loan of their wonderful venue, and thank you to the library staff for all of your assistance. We very, very much appreciate it. And a very big thank you to our gallery volunteers, Sarah and Connie, who volunteered their time tonight to help deliver this event to you. And finally, thank you to all of you for attending tonight's special event. And we extend an invitation to all of you to come to the Bundaberg Regional Art Gallery if you haven't yet already, to view Hossein's wonderful installation in the vault. And we look forward to seeing you there. So thank you and good night.